Rabotai, this past Shabbat I was away. We took our teenage minyan out to New Jersey to a shabbaton. We stayed in the Hyatt Place in Fort Lee. And Borei Olam gave us a siyata d'shmaya this Shabbat with these boys that was beyond everybody's expectations, including my own. And I'm a dreamer, and I shoot very high, and a perfectionist. And nonetheless, I knew it had nothing to do with me, with the boys. It was all Borei Olam from beginning to end. The Kiddush Hashem that was made in this hotel. Both what happened with the boys themselves. I saw the way they came in, and they came out a different person. With such yirat shamayim, the singing, the dancing. We were up with them till 1 o'clock in the morning Friday night. Stories, dirashot, oneg Shabbat. Nobody wanted to sleep. The hotel came to us after the Shabbat and said, please come back next year. We never had a group, especially boys, who are so fantastically behaved, who are so polite, with such character. Please come back next year. At the end of the Shabbat, it was like we traveled to a different planet, a place of Kiddusha in an unbelievable experience. And we came back, Bnei Torah, new people. The boys themselves on the end of the night, after the kumzitz and after the music and after the dancing and after the hypnotist and after the Mlava Malka and after the stories and after the whole amazing Shabbat, the boys walked up to me and said, Rabbi, how are we ever going to be able to top this? We don't want to go home. We don't want this to end. So I'm saying Barabim to Borei Olam, thank you Hashem. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam hasdo. Ve'imru hoshienu. It should go weiter. We should continue to have an unbelievable success with our high school boys because they are the future of Klal Yisrael. Especially that age. Not a simple age. And to be able to have such an amazing group, Borei Olam, continue to help us to see nachat. Because to me, it's so emotionally driven. These are the sons of my Talmidim. These are the next generation Magen Avraham. I started with their fathers 20 years ago, when they were in high school. Married them. Sent their kids to yeshivot. And now we're looking at the perot of the next generation. And over Shabbat, one boy got up on a chair and started singing. And I saw his father. The same nuances. The same little knetch, the same little... Another boy got up and he started dancing. I saw his father. That's the way his father dances. It was amazing to me. It was like deja vu. It was back to the future. Reliving the amazing dorot and the rahmanut and the chesed that Hashem did with us. Thank you, Hashem. This was something to remember. We should all be zochet to be matzliach with our kids and to see dorot yisharim mevorach ve'ezat Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. Rabotay, I want to open up tonight what I think is a very powerful topic. Because I was away this past Shabbat, I was not really able to speak on this past week. So I want to touch upon this tonight. It's still Monday. I can still catch Vayechi. Hazak v'hazak v'nit hazek. Rabotay, listen to me. I want you to picture this. There's a Ganav, and he was walking through the streets of Jerusalem, and he was looking for a big fish. He was looking to mug somebody, but somebody with a good return. So he's scouring the streets, walking up and down the side streets, in and out of Mahaneh Yehuda, till finally he spots the guy. He sees a guy dressed in a good suit. And he's walking holding an attaché case. And the attaché case is handcuffed to his arm. Oh. And he says to himself, that's it. This guy's probably carrying diamonds. He's probably carrying all types of big money. Maybe he's a money changer. Sometimes those guys in Israel, they're walking around with millions of dollars. I know one such guy. Mamash walks around from location to location with millions of dollars. He says, this guy is my big hit. He follows the guy. Till finally, this well-dressed guy, handcuffed to the attaché case, walks down a small side street. He says, this is my opportunity. He jumps the guy. He gives him a whack in the back of the head and he knocks the guy out. And at that moment, the guy falls to the ground and he cuts the chain right off the attaché case that was attached to his wrist. And at that moment, he grabs the attaché case and runs. He runs his way back to his house, a few blocks away. And over there, he cracks open the attaché case and he's smiling. This is the big one. Click, click. Flips it open and he looks down and his jaw drops. And he cannot believe his eyes. And he sees, instead of what he thought was diamonds, instead of what he thought was millions, there was a bomb ticking in this attaché case. And it already started. And it was ticking away. And he saw that he only had 10 minutes left before it detonates. And he realizes that when he went and mugged this guy, who he thought was some big wealthy guy in a good suit, turned out to be an Arab on his way to a suicide bombing. And he was on his way to detonate this bomb in some very populated area. He thought there were diamonds, money, wealth, the big fish. And it turned out that he ended up knocking the guy out and grabbing the bomb. And now it's ticking away. And in a few minutes, it's going to blow right in front of him. What does he do? He runs to the phone. He calls the Israeli Mishtara. He calls the police, the bomb squad. He gives them the address. Come down fast. They come down to his house. And at the last seconds, with only a few minutes left, the professionals in the Israeli bomb squad, they end up detonating the bomb. They end up shutting it down. They turned to the guy and they said, "You're a hero. You're a hero." He says, "That's right. I knew that guy looked fishy. I knew that guy looked funny. I saw something was funny. I had a hunch that he's a suicide bomber. And sure enough, I chased him down, knocked him out, cut the bomb right off his arm, and called you guys. He probably got away. But I was thinking about the bigger picture. I was thinking about saving Jerusalem. You guys got here just in time. You detonated the bomb." They said, "Wow, you're a hero." They put this guy's face in all the Israeli papers. They gave him a key to the city. They gave him a Medal of Honor. He got to meet with the President of Israel, shaking hands. He's a hero. Rabotai, I want to ask you a question. Is he a hero? Is this guy a hero? The guy's a Ganav. He went and knocked the guy out thinking that this was his big score for the week. He relentlessly knocked the guy out thinking that he was about to rob a big fish. He grabbed the suitcase thinking millions of dollars was now his future. What a turn of events at the last second. Yes, what else could he do? The bomb was ticking in his own house. Of course he's calling the bomb squad. Of course he's going to get them down to... His life was on the line with everybody else now. Is he a hero? I ask you a question. Is he a hero? Or is he a Ganav? Mamash Ganav. The brothers turn to Yosef Hatzadik and they say to Yosef, "Please, Aviv Tziva, our father, right before he passed. Avicha tziva lifnei moto lemor ko tomiru li Yosef Ana sana pesha achecha v'chatatam kira gemulecha. They came crying to Yosef right after Yaakov Avinu died. Right after he died. They come running to Yosef, crying. Your father commanded, please, forgive your brothers. Forgive us for what we did to you. Yosef Hatzadik turns around and he says the following. You guys are suicide bombers. Atem chashavtem alai ra'ah. Va'elohim chasheva letova. You guys were Ganav. You were Ganav. What's the pasuk say? Gonev ish umcharo mot yumat. You guys were Ganav. Va'elohim chasheva letova. What did he answer? Even though you meant for me to do bad to me, atem chashavtem alai ra'ah, but Elokim chasheva letova, and therefore it's okay. I don't have to be mochel you. Yosef, just because Hashem at the end decided to flip the outcome does not mean that they don't need your mechila. They came to kill you. They paskined on you mita. They paskined on you rodef. They threw you in a bore of akravim nahashim. They sold you down to Egypt, to Avdut, to be finished. All the tzarot that you went through, you were sold on the block like a behemah. You were sold like an eved. You were thrown from place to place. What happened to you in the house of Potiphar, Eshet Potiphar, was their grama. You got thrown in jail, literally, for years. Atem chashevtem alai l'ra'ah, ve'elokim chasheva letova. What's going on over here? Yes, at the end Hashem decided to switch it for good. But what does that have to do with the mechila that they required from you to do? When the Ganav went and knocked the guy out, he wasn't coming to steal? He wasn't mugging the guy? Of course he was mugging the guy. He's not a prasta Ganav? Of course he's a prasta Ganav. Just because the suitcase that you thought had millions ended up with a different outcome, and it turned out to be a suicide bomb, which you ended up yourself calling in order to save yourself with everybody else. So now you're a hero? Because it turned out good, so now you're a hero? Nothing else that led up to that point do you have to give any mechila for? What is Yosef saying? What was the statement to the brothers? Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh on this pasuk, a one-liner. The Or HaChaim, similar to Rashi, when he gives you a one-liner, you're going to have to schwitz to understand this. You're going to have to schwitz to understand this. Says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, you know what Yosef was telling his brothers? It's like someone who wanted to bring his friend a cup of poison, and it turned out that he gave him instead a cup of wine. Ma omer Or HaChaim HaKadosh. What is he saying? What does that mean? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And in truth, at the end of the day, the Or HaChaim is saying that he actually attempted to give him a cup of poison. That's not an attempt to murder. I don't have to ask mechila. You're right, at the end the guy made a mistake and gave him wine instead. But he attempted to poison him. No, Or HaChaim HaKadosh. How are you making things better? Or HaChaim HaKadosh is saying something brilliant, Rabotai, as always. I'd like to take a step back and understand that there's a tremendous omek in what we're about to say tonight. Borei Olam should give us the words, because this is mamish, the yesod hayesodot of everything we believe in. When did this conversation take place? When was it that the brothers came to Yosef and begged him for forgiveness? When was it that the brothers started to really get so nervous and they came pleading, even made up a story that their father was tziva, which never happened, just for the sake of the shalom, to get the mechila? When did this take place? The simple pshat, it sounds like when they returned to Egypt. That's what it sounds like. The Midrash says not like that. The Midrash, and we mentioned this Midrash in past years in Shiurim, an amazing Midrash. The Midrash says that when the brothers accompanied Yaakov Avinu's body up to Eretz Yisrael, they brought Yaakov Avinu to be buried in Ma'arat HaMachpelah. There stood Esav. Esav was stopping them from burying Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu sits up, tells to Naphtali, quick, Naphtali, Ayala Shlucha, run down to Egypt, get the document, get the contract that Esav signed on when he sold the Bechorah, showing that he has no place at Ma'arat HaMachpelah, but I purchased it, it's mine. Naphtali runs down to Egypt. Meanwhile, the son, Hushim ben Dan, the son of Dan, who we know was mute, was deaf, walks up with an etz, and he knocks Esav's head right off, decapitates him, rolls right into Ma'arat HaMachpelah. Wow. At that point, they were able to freely go and bury Yaakov Avinu Ma'arat HaMachpelah. You think that that's the end of the story, Rabotai? Says the Midrash, a story that happened that not too many talk about. Not the story of Ma'arat HaMachpelah's burial. That's not where the story ends. Says the Midrash, and you can look at this up in the Peshurim we gave with the Mar Mekomot. Says the Midrash, after they buried their father Ma'arat HaMachpelah, Yosef and his brothers traveled together on the way back from Ma'arat HaMachpelah down to Mitzrayim. And on the road they traveled through Shechem. And they walked right by the bore that the brothers threw Yosef into in the beginning of Mechirat Yosef. And says the Midrash that Yosef walked up to the edge of this bore in his royal garments and his crown on his head, and he looked down in the very pit of the lowest point of his life, where his own brothers, his own siblings, threw him to his death. Nechashim akravim, haborek en bo mayim, mayim en bo, says Rashi. Nechashim akravim, yesh. Yosef is standing by the edge of the bore, and he's reminiscing, he's reliving the moments of the biggest trauma of his childhood, his own flesh and blood. His brothers threw him into this pit. And the brothers are standing there with him, looking at each other in shame, as Yosef is looking down into this deep pit. And they see that he's reminiscing the whole story. And quickly the brothers on top of the edge of the pit, they turn to Yosef and they see, forget it. He's reliving it. He's remembering the whole mice of what we did to him. You don't know the mice. You don't know the real story. You don't know. If you would know the real story, if you would know the way the Midrash describes that story, you would cry your heart out. The Midrash says that Shimon was the one who grabbed Yosef, and Yosef wrapped himself around the leg of Shimon, and he pleaded and he begged, don't do it. Don't throw me to the snakes. I'm your brother. I'm your flesh and blood. Don't do it. And he was holding the leg of Shimon, says the Midrash, and Shimon kicked him off. And Yosef rolled to the other side, and the other brothers grabbed him, and he begged them, please, don't do it. And he turned to the Bnei Shvachot, his friends, don't let them do it. And they turned their backs on him. And he was thrown back and forth, till finally, they threw him in. And here they are years later, standing right back at the same pit that the whole story began. But this time Yosef is standing at the edge with a crown on his head in royal garments, and he begins to cry. And the brothers say, oh no, that's it. He's crying. He's remembering. He's reminiscing. We're finished. We're finished. We're done. Out of desperation, right there at the edge of the pit, the brothers make up a story for their lives. Avicha tziva lifnei moto. Please have mercy. I beg of you. Your father even commanded, forgive us what we did to you here, b'makom hazeh. Forgive us. Forgive us. We'll be your avadim. We sold you as eved. Mida keneged mida. We'll be your avadim. Please, forgive us. Sana pesha achecha. You know what Yosef turns around and tells them? Atam chashavtem alay ra'ah. You think that I'm thinking about the bad that you did to me here in this bar? That's not what I'm thinking about. You know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about the good that Borei Olam did to me here in this bar. Elohim chasheva letova. Ay, 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 ay. Look, this is the pit that I started my miseries. And I thought at the time that it was you that threw me in the bar. I thought at the time that it was you that sold me down to Egypt to slavery. Now I come back to the bar with a crown on my head. I revisited my own pit and realized that it was Hashem all along. It was never you. It was all Borei Olam. He was the one that threw me in the pit. He was the one that sent me down to Egypt, not to slavery, to royalty. He wanted me to come back to this spot with a crown on my head, with royal clothing, to remember my humble beginnings. Sometimes in life, you have to revisit your own bor to appreciate what Borei Olam did for you all along. Look what he did for me. Look where I once was, and look where I am now. I realized it wasn't you at all. It had nothing to do with you. You had your cheshbonot, atem chashavtem alay ra'ah, but it had nothing to do with you because it was really Borei Olam. And it was all for the good from the beginning till the end. Wow. Sometimes in life, people have to revisit their bar in order to be able to look up and realize that the master of all results, the master of all outcomes, is only Hashem and nobody else. Ein Od Milvado. And this is an amazing concept. We're so quick to complain and point fingers at people. Nobody can do nothing to you. It's not the neighbor. It's not the buyer. It has nothing to do with the president. It doesn't even have to do with COVID. It's Borei Olam from beginning to end. Ein Od Milvado. Atem chashavtem alay ra'ah. You can think all the cheshbonot you want. You can try whatever you want. You can't touch me. You know why? Because ani bayadayim shel Abba. And look what Abba did for me. He brought me from the pit to royalty. From the pit to the palace. That's what Borei Olam did to me. And now I see it. Now I see it. I had to revisit the bor with the crown on my head to realize that it was Hashem that put me in the pit in order for one day Hashem put me in the palace. And all this struggle along the way was all Borei Olam. You were just puppets. Strings were being pulled. But Borei Olam is the only one, the master of all results and outcomes. He's the one from the very beginning, and He's the one to the very end. Ani Rishon, va'ani Aharon, u'mibaladai en Elokim. This is something else. Hi, Rabotai. I'd like to read you a few words from the Bet HaLevi, my favorite sefer, in his Ma'amar HaBitachon. Rabbi Yosef Ber, Soloveitchik Mibris, Zechet Hatzadik Lebracha. And how he writes, something that to me took us by storm. Listen to these words, Rabotai, open your hearts. V'chazek libo b'bitchono b'tikvato bo yitbarach. Be mechazek your heart in bitachon, to rely only on Hashem and nobody else in every situation. B'tikvato, and hope only to Hashem bo yitbarach, nobody else. V'yikba b'libo, and be koiveya in your heart. Asher bil'ado yitbarach, besides Hashem, en lo mimi levakesh ezra. You cannot ask nor receive help from anyone other than Hashem. No one in the world can help you other than Hashem. Ukvar mevuar b'sefer Nefesh HaChaim, says the Bet HaLevi, it's already Yadua, the famous Segula of Reb Chaim Volozhiner in his Sefer Nefesh HaChaim. Asher imro'eh adam et atzmo b'tzar halila. If a person would chas v'shalom see himself in tsar, in a bad situation of any type, in any which way, it could be family problems, it could be money problems, it could be people problems, God forbid it could be government problems, whatever problems, chas v'shalom, lo aleinu v'lo alechem, shiduchim problems, health problems, whatever problems. Yitbonen be'achdut haboreh. A person needs to focus on the oneness of God. It doesn't mean that there's one God. It means that there's only Hashem. Asher en od milivado. There is no other force in the world. There's no one else that has any power, nor strength, nor control on anyone or anything. And especially not on you. Only Hashem. He's the only one that has control. Only one who has power. Only one that dictates what happens to every single human being. Va'az, memela, if a person is mitbonen, Ein Od Milvado, ani bayadayim shel Abba, the only one in charge is Hashem. He is the boss. He calls the shots. Nobody else but Borei Olam has any power in this world, has any control in this world on anything. No one has any control on me. No one can do nothing to me. No one can take anything from me, and no one can give me anything. It's only Borei Olam. Ein Od Milvado. There is no other power, no other force. Har Sinai, Borei Olam comes down to the mountain and he says, Klal Yisrael, look! He pulls back the vilon. He pulls back the curtain of heaven. And he shows Klal Yisrael, look straight up to Kisei HaKavod. There's no other power, no other force, no other gods, no other control other than me. Look, there's no one up there but me. No mazalot, no srafim, no powers, no nothing. There's no one else that has any shlita or koach other than Hashem in this world and in every world and in anything. He's the only existing power, period. When you're mitbonen in this, that Hashem is the only one who has power, Hashem is the only one who has control, I'm in Hashem's hands, no one else can touch me, I'm in Hashem's hands, Az memela yistalku mimenu kol hadinim vakitrugim. At that point, all the dinim on the person slips away. All the kitrugim on the person, God forbid, slips away. All the troublemakers that are in this guy's life disappears. All the problems that this guy is facing suddenly fades. Ein Od Milvado. Ani bayadayim shel Abba. Hashem is the only one that has any power or control. And I am in His hands. Nobody can touch me. Uchmamar HaKatuv, listen to this pasuk in Yeshaya. Says Borei Olam, Ani asiti, va'ani esa, va'ani esbol, va'amalet. It's all me, says Borei Olam. There's nobody else that has any power over anything but me. And if you're going through a trouble, I gave you that trouble. Not the neighbor, not the son-in-law, not the mother-in-law, not the daughter-in-law, not the friend, not the uncle, not the guy in work, not the boss. Nobody. I gave you that problem. And I'm the only one that could take it away. Ein Od Milvado. It's amazing. What a concept. I'm sure you guys know many of the stories we told over the years of Ein Od Milvado. The famous Meiser of the Briskerov on the train. As the soldiers walked through the train, Ein Od Milvado. They were looking for Jews. They walked right by him. A man with a long beard and a black coat. You couldn't get more of a rabbi-looking person. You know this story. I told it to you already many times. Ein Od Milvado. Says Yosef, Atem chashavtem alai ra'ah. But what you don't understand is, Elokim chasheva l'tova. You could try whatever you want to try, but ultimately, He's the final word for everything. Hashem is the master of all outcome, all results. And no matter what you thought to do to me, nothing could touch me because I'm with Borei Olam. Ein Od Milvado. Unbelievable. 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 You know, this concept of Ein Od Milvado is so powerful. So powerful. That for a minute you have to stop and you have to ask yourself, there's something here that needs to be explained. On one hand, the reason why Hashem created the world was to give a person koacha bechira, free will, to choose, choice. Hashem is perfect. He wanted to give man an opportunity for perfect reward. If He were to give it to you for free, that's not perfect reward. That's a handout. That's nothing to be proud of. Says Borei Olam, I want you to earn the reward so you can be a master of your own reward, so I can give you reward in the most perfect of ways, in the way that you earned it. So explains the Ramchal in why Hashem gave us bechira. Go choose between good and bad. So when you choose the good, I can give you a reward that's a perfect reward, because Hashem is perfect and everything He does reflects His perfection. How does this concept of Ein Od Milvado stem with Koach HaBechira? How do these two concepts work together? Aren't they contradictory? Bechira means that the guy has a choice whether he wants to hurt you or not. Ein Od Milvado is dictating to us, as the Bet HaLevi describes from the Nefesh HaChaim, that no one can touch you if they wanted to, because you are in Hashem's hands, and Hashem's the only one in control, and Hashem is the only koach in the world, and no one can do nothing outside of Hashem's will. So what's going on here? On one hand, the guy has a choice whether to punch you or not. On the other hand, nothing can happen to you through nobody at all, only Hashem. He's the only koach that dictates everything. How does this concept work with koach habechira? That's a tremendous question. Because if you're telling me that when the guy came and punched the other guy, it's because Hashem wanted him to get punched, so that means that the guy who punched had no choice. How do you explain? Rabotai, the guy holding the gun has a choice whether to pull the trigger or not. But if that bullet is going to end up hitting its target or missing, Hashem. Atem chashavtem alai l'ra'ah. You pulled the trigger, my brothers. But Hashem made sure that the bullet missed me. Wow. Nobody can do nothing to you. Yes, they have freedom of choice. Yes, they can choose to do all the bad in the world. But it'll never affect or reach you unless Hashem wills it to actually hit you. And therefore this guy came along and he wanted to serve his friend a cup of poison, says the Or HaHaim HaKadosh. But if Hashem doesn't want the guy on the receiving end to drink poison, He'll make sure that at the end in that cup there's wine. This is an amazing thing. And this is the omek. This is the omek, says Yosef Hatzadik. As long as a person realizes it's all Borei Olam, he becomes untouchable. No matter who is conspiring against him, no matter what problems he has, no matter who's coming after him, he becomes untouchable the minute he surrenders to Hashem's Ein Od Milvado. Ani bayadayim shel Abba, I am untouchable. This is too much. You know, there's this great debate amongst the Chachamim if the Segula of Ein Od Milvado works for only the will of people that are coming to hurt you, or does this also work against things from Shamayim as well? You see, if you have someone who's coming after to hurt you, like the famous story over there of the Brisker Rav on the train, when the soldiers came in looking for Jews, and he closed his eyes, Ein Od Milvado, and they walked right by him. Yeah, that's because there were people threatening. This was a threat from Bnei Adam. Ein Od Milvado, no one can touch me because I'm in Hashem's protection. Hashem is the only koach, no other koach in the world can have any effect on me because I'm in Hashem's hands. Connected to Hashem, I'm untouchable. I'm untouchable. Ein Od Milvado. Ein Od Milvado. I'm untouchable. But what about if it's not a human threat that's coming at the person? What happens if it's a problem or a threat that comes from Shamayim? For instance, Chas v'Shalom, the person gets sick. Does Ein Od Milvado Segula of the Nefesh HaChaim work for that too? Does it work on a problem of Shmaimit, Davar Min HaShamayim, or maybe it only works against the Koach of Bnei Adam? Do you know that Reb Shlomo Wolbe, Zecher Tzadik L'Bracha, held that the Segula of the Nefesh HaChaim works only against the threat and the nezek of people. But if chas v'shalom someone gets sick, Ein Od Milvado, that sigula is not going to help him for the sickness. He says, I'll tell you why. I'll give you a svar of why. He says, because when it comes to people, there's an outside force that's trying to come and hurt you. The minute you go and concentrate and be mitbonen Ein Od Milvado, Hashem's absolute jurisdiction literally takes over. No one can touch you. You're in Borei Olam's absolute koach and hands. But when it comes to a sickness, who sent you the sickness? Borei Olam. So what do you say? Ein Od Milvado. Yeah, Ein Od Milvado. That's where it came from. That's where it came from. You know that famous story, the guy that was driving on the side of the road by the mountains, and then his car slipped off the side and it's hanging off of a tree, and the guy slips out of the car and he's holding onto a branch for his life. And then people drive by and they throw him a rope and he says, no, God's going to save me. And then the helicopter comes and drops him a rope ladder. No, God's going to save me, right? You know the whole story. At the end he falls and he dies, right? And he comes up to heaven and he says, God, why didn't you save me? And he says, Meshugana, who do you think sent you the rope? Who do you think sent you the helicopter? Who do you think sent? But Rabbi Weinberg from Eretz Yisrael used to tell this story differently. Differently. And that was that the guy, Taka, at the last second was saved. And then after 120 years, he comes up to Shema and he says, thank you, Hashem, you saved me hanging off that cliff. And God says to him, who do you think pushed you off the cliff in the first place? Hashem says Revolba, he sent them the sickness. What do you mean, Ein Od Milvado? Yeah, because Ein Od Milvado. Because you're under the power and the koach of the only one that exists. This is the gzeira from Shamayim that came from the jurisdiction of God. Saying Ein Od Milvado only reiterates the fact that the sickness came from God. Now you have to go do tshuva on the sickness. Go to a doctor. Mukhrach velo mo'il. However, the Bet HaLevi doesn't agree with this. The Bet HaLevi holds that this gula of the Nefesh HaChaim, Ein Od Milvado, doesn't only work against people's threat, but even problems and threats from heaven. Even on Gzerot min HaShamayim, even on sickness, even on Davar Shmaimit. And the truth is, the svara could be flipped the other way. And that is, you think that when people come and make trouble for you, you think that that's called nezek from Bnei Adam. Whereas when it comes to sickness, that's called something from Shamayim as a threat. When a person comes and threatens you, the person has no shlita over you. He was a puppet that's being pulled by the strings of the great puppet master, the Borei Olam, that only Yachid Umiyuhad. This guy has nothing. The fact that he picked on you was literally Shamayim driven as well. Who do you think sent this guy in the first place? But just because he has a badge, just because he's called the IRS, so you think Shamayim has nothing to do with it? Or you think Pitom they decided to pick you out of a goral? Shamayim has ways of waking up people. They can wake you up through the threats of other people, or they can wake you up through the threats of heaven. Gezerot can come on people through other people, or through heavenly forces. But at the end of the day, it's all Shamayim. Even the people is Shmaimit as well. Because this guy can't do nothing to you. He has no power, he has nothing. It's all Borei Olam. He's the one who sent the guy through the problem, and he's the only one that can take it away. And if that's the case, says the Bet HaLevi, Ein Od Milvado, it is always and only Hashem. every struggle, every problem, no matter if originated from people, no matter if originated from Shamayim, at the end of the day, whatever force comes out a person in a problematic way, in a tzara, in an issue that he has to deal with, Ein Od Milvado. Put yourself in Hashem's hands, and you'll see how it all will dissipate and have no effect on you. Amazing. This is what Yosef is screaming. You could conspire from today till tomorrow. And what they did, the act, they did. Ganav ishum charo. And that's why years later there was Asara Haruge Malchut. Because they did an act that Lamaisa was a kidnapping and a selling. Someone had to pay that price. But you didn't do it to me. While you were involved in an act of kidnapping and selling, Borei Olam was involved in sending me a mission to royalty. So I don't have to give you mechila because you didn't do nothing to me. I was on the way to royalty. You were on the way to kidnapping and selling. You need a kapara from Shamayim. I was on the way to what Hashem had me from the pit right up to the palace all along. Psh, this is too much. Unbelievable. How to look at life through the eyes of Yosef Hatzadik. A Baal Bitachon. A Baal Bitachon. A Baal Bitachon. It's unbelievable. In a minute I'm going to tell you an amazing story. The Bet HaLevi with Ein Od Milvado. The Bet HaLevi, this is an amazing Maisa. The Bet HaLevi. You know, there was a person who was a Baal Chanut, a Jewish person in the town of the Bet HaLevi. And one day, there was a surprise search. The tax collectors came from the government, and they were going through the stores, and they were going through the merchandise. Apparently, this guy had either illegal merchandise in his store, or maybe he had too much merchandise in his store, and the tax collector was going to literally finish him off, and there was no time to get rid of the goods. These tax collector was only a few stores away from his, and they were coming down the row, one at a time. So this Yiddish guy, runs to the house of the Bet HaLevi, and he says, Rebbe, save me. They're going to throw me in jail. There's no way, I have so much in the back of there's no way I can clear it out in time. The time they get to me, I'm done. The Bet HaLevi turns to this Yid and says to him, do you believe that Hashem is the only koach in this world? Do you believe Ein Od Milvado? He said, yes. He says, if that's the case, sit down. They went over together. Ein Od Milvado. Ein Od Milvado. No chamo. Ein Od Milvado. Ein Od Milvado. Ein Od Milvado. They sat there for 2 hours. Ein Od Milvado. Ein Od Milvado. Till finally it got in the bones of the guy that there's no other power in this world other than Hashem. Hashem is the only one. And nobody else can do anything to you but Borei Olam. The Bet HaLevi says, okay, you can go back to your store. The man goes back to his store and he cannot believe his eyes. And then he found out what happened. As he was there in the house screaming, Ein Od Milvado, these inspectors, they came right up to his store. And they decided when they got up to his store, they're going to break for lunch. So they went and they made a red mark on the door of his store to remind them where they're up to. They went out for lunch, and then when they came back after lunch, the people heard one inspector tell the other inspector, hey, wait 1 second. When we made the red mark on this door, on this store, what was that a siman for? Does that mean that this was the last store we already did? Or is this the store we're up to? And the other guy says, yeah, I think we made the red mark to show that this was the last store we already did. Let's move on to the next store. And they skipped his store and moved on to the next store. Ein Od Milvado. Screams Yosef Hatzadik. In every issue you may run into in life, remember, It doesn't matter who out there, Has v'shalom, is making troubles for you. It doesn't matter if it's a family member. It doesn't matter if it's a business associate, a buyer, a seller, a government official. It doesn't matter. Atem chashavtem alai l'ra'ah, from today till tomorrow. But you know what? Ein Od Milvado. I realized it was Hashem that put me in the pit in order to one day bring me to the crown in the palace that He eventually brings us at the moment that we realize Ani bayadayim shel Abba. Ein Od Milvado. Thank you for listening.